Hello and welcome back to UView. I'm Aiden Paramore. Today we will be discussing the variety of changes our AHS community has recently been facing. Between the major construction project coupled with ongoing AHS pandemic and other matters, we asked members of the student body to submit topical questions about the many exciting and rapid changes occurring in our classrooms and the community. And who better to answer those questions than the principal himself? We are honored today to have special guest AHS Principal Dr. Matthew Janger on for this exclusive episode from ACMI's Studio B. Dr. Janger, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Aiden.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
It's good to hear. How did you end up as a high school principal, and is this always where you saw yourself ending up?
I'm not sure when I decided to move in this direction, but I started running outdoor education programs, and I really liked the process of running and organizing schools, but also being a teacher. I was an English teacher for about 10 years, and then I decided that leading organizations was something that was really interesting to me. So I got an MBA, and then I got a PhD, and I found my way here after a little while.
Sounds like a journey. What are some of your hobbies?
So recently my biggest activity has been maintaining a backyard hockey rink. It's a lot of fun to be able to get out skating on any day. It makes you enjoy the cold weather a lot more. I'm a skateboarder back in the day, and I play guitar a little bit.
Do you skate?
Do I skate on the hockey rink? Yes, badly.
As a principal, what are some exciting changes that you're anticipating for your future as a principal and as the AHS community altogether?
Well, I mean, obviously the biggest thing we have going forward right now is moving into the new building. That's just a few weeks away. We're starting to see things disappear from classrooms, move packets are happening. People are starting to realize that it's a reality that's coming really soon. I'm also looking forward to the end of the current surge and really putting this sort of strange time in our rearview mirror. I think that's going to happen pretty quickly. We're already, I think, learning to adjust, so some of the disruptions aren't so bad. But I think when we're able to really come together easily as a whole community, it's going to be a really big difference. It's very hard to run a school where you can't get everybody in the same room.
Yeah. Speaking more on the new building in general, many students have expressed their concerns about getting to classes on time and have some questions about longer commutes due to construction. How is the administration planning to address the concerns around passage time between the classes?
Well, in our current building, we have 1.5 miles of hallways and 25 stairwells. We only have 3 minutes of passing time. So we know realistically right now students are not always able to get from one class to another. Our expectation is the 3 minutes is meant to say you're expected to go from one class directly to the next. If we added 2 more minutes to that, some students would still be traveling. So that's the expectation. Teachers are going to know that people are going to take longer, especially in the first few days, and they're going to be accommodating to that. We don't use bells for that reason. We really want a humane pace to the day where the teacher ends the class when the clock looks like it's about time to end the class, and the teacher starts when everybody has briskly gotten there and everybody's in the class. And that's where we want to keep going.
I think that's good to hear. I know a lot of people were a little worried about that.
I think the people who are most worried about getting to class on time are usually in class on time.
Yes, yes, they always are. One student asked if the new building setup will provide space for student parking. Do you have any predictions regarding the future of student parking?
So the normal size of a lot to build a building like this would be about 25 acres. We have 22 acres. So the parking that we're going to have right now will be about the same amount of parking we have now moved on site. It'll be a little bit better, but there is no space or plan for student parking on site. Sorry.
We all have disappointments sometimes. One student did express their opinion that the current AHS building is not very ADA compliant. I know with the new building coming up, everyone's very excited to transition into that. How does the new building address these accessibility concerns?
So first, any new building has to be, new construction has to be ADA compliant. That's just an expectation. This building was built with a real eye to inclusion and accessibility. It's not a long trip from anywhere to anywhere. There are 2 elevators that are located pretty centrally. So students, even just who've just broken a leg and are hobbling around, will be able to have a pass card to get to those elevators. They're not going to have to go down from one place and come back up in another. So I think that folks who are mobility impaired are going to find that it's much more accessible. There's also going to be sound lift technology in all of the classrooms for students who are hearing impaired. It's also a helpful thing for students with ADHD. So there's a lot of features I could go on of the building that I think will make it much more accessible and inclusive.
What will the commute from one building to the other look like for students with accessibility issues?
You're talking about during phase 2?
Yes.
During phase 2, they're going to be suffering some of the same problems they have now, right? When they are within the old building, they're going to still have that long walk all the way around. One of the things we know is going to happen is if the student really has substantial mobility issues, we may have to move classes. In fact, in Down's house, there are 2 floors that are not accessible by elevator. So if there is a student who's mobility impaired in those, we have a plan for switching those students' classrooms to one of the floors that has elevator access.
Sounds like it's been very thought through.
It's been thought through, but it's, and it's challenging, right? I mean, if a student right now is on crutches, which is our biggest mobility issue, we find that they, spend a few days traveling on the elevators, and then most of them learn how to go up and down stairs with a crutch because it's such a long walk. So one of the things we really hope is that if a student is finding it challenging, they let us know so that we can make accommodations.
Of course. What will the cafeteria setup look like once we move into the new building?
So we're there, right? We moved into the new blue gym in the pit as our spaces for cafeteria use, and we're going to be in that setup for the next year and a half. It's actually working pretty well. I kind of like the new gym setup better than the old one. One of the things I know that's been a challenge as we moved into the new caf is food is not as necessarily, we don't have as many options. That's actually not a cafeteria issue as much as it's been a staffing issue. So again, as supply chain issues clear out and as we get more staffing, we expect that the cafeteria offerings will be pretty comparable to what we've had in the past.
So when is that cafeteria going to be moving into the new building? Is that a phase 3 project?
So phase 2 is when we finish the library, the cafeteria, and the central spine, as well as all of the humanities wing. So at that point, when phase 2 is done, it's going to feel a lot like we're done, right? The only thing that will be left after that will be my office and the athletics wing. So you're going to, at that point, have a big, beautiful cafeteria with 40-foot ceilings with multiple seating options. There'll be booths, high tops, forum stairs. And so the idea is that people have a lot of options. The scramble servery is actually under the forum stairs. And it'll be laid out similarly to what we have now, much more open, so the students can come in and access the different kinds of food options. And then the kitchen will be there. Right now our kitchen is at Thompson, so the main cooking is not happening on site.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy. So once we're in the new building, I know some students back in this building have expressed their frustration with the lack of gender-neutral facilities around. What gender-neutral locker room and restroom opportunities are going to be possible in the new building?
So when we were doing the visioning for the new building, the first thing students said was bathrooms, just bathrooms, period, right? Because there's so few, they're so far between. So there are something like twice as many, if not more, bathrooms. Within the new wing, every floor has a bathroom suite. And in that bathroom suite, whenever there's a bathroom, there's always a universal option, and then if there's a male and female option, there's always an accessible option as well. So, if you're on any one of those floors, you're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 8 gender neutral in just that wing and then 2 on the other side. So it's gonna significantly increase our gender neutral options in the main building.
That's good to hear. Are the accessible options and the gender neutral options generally the same, or are there separate options for that?
So most of the the gender neutral options are all accessible toilets.
That's good. We know everyone's very excited and anxious to move into the new building, and most students want to make sure that the cleanliness and order is maintained in the new facilities, especially in the restrooms. What are some of the plans that the administration has to keep the new building clean and looking brand new?
In many ways, we can hire custodians, we can run around the halls and encourage kids to be well behaved, but that's a team effort, right? The students are going to have to support us and help us out on that. and we're going to have norms of really taking care of and respecting the space. You know, it's meant to be more graffiti resistant. There are tiles on the walls all the way around through the stairwells and the halls. But if students don't take care of it, it's going to be really hard for us to keep up with it. I think one of the most helpful things students can do, other than being respectful and cleaning up after themselves, is reporting immediately any damage or any issues they see. One, because it lessens the impact on other students, but also because we can take care of it quickly. There's a lot more cameras in the new building, so students engaging in disruptive behavior in the hallways are more likely to be identified, but we'll still need really help from the students. You know, and I never really understood, I mean, I understand, but I never really understood graffiti and vandalism, right? Like this is our space, why would we destroy it? The people who are trying the hardest to make this school nice for you are the custodians, right? So you're not, if you're mad at somebody, it is not a helpful thing to destroy the space that you have to live in, right? It doesn't make it more comfortable for anybody. So hopefully people will be respectful and understand that.
Well, we owe a lot of thanks to the custodians for all the work that they do in the building. One student expressed their frustration regarding the menstrual products in restrooms. Does the administration have any plans regarding the menstrual products in the future?
So there are period product dispensers in all of the new restrooms, and you know, that's a standard thing. I know there's been a question about the quality of the menstrual products, and so and I can only say I thought we had addressed that. I think we have addressed that. If we have not addressed that, students should reach out to our nursing clinic so that we can really work on making sure that we have products that are effective and comfortable for our students.
Yeah, of course. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about COVID in general. I know it's a little bit of a...
That's way less fun.
I know. The new building's much more exciting. But how do you feel about the way that the student body has responded to the enforcement of masking protocols, especially since the administration has done so much to keep us safe in this pandemic right now?
I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on places where people slip, but I actually feel like when I walk around the school, the vast majority of students are really, you know, complying and being appropriate. I mean, it's pretty easy for anybody to not realize that their mask has slipped over their nose, but most of the time when we ask students to put them back on again, they pull them back up again. And the reality that we see is we're monitoring every week, right? Cases, when there are cases, we have followed up. When it looks like there might be a cluster of cases, we've looked to see where that comes from. And we have seen really very little evidence that the schools are a place where COVID is being transmitted, which is the part that we're most concerned with. I actually did, after the first week back, when we did the big push where we pool tested almost all the students on Monday, it took us 2 days to get the results back. And so my question was, there were about 35 students identified as having COVID, and they were here for 2 days. So we had a really good question of like, was COVID spreading in the classrooms where those students were? So I randomly selected 3 classrooms where we knew there had been a case for 2 days and 3 where we didn't, and I tested everybody in those classes. We had only 1 case, and it was not in one of the classes where there had been a student. So that gives us some pretty good reassurance that in well-ventilated spaces where people are being, you know, attentive, even if there's some slipping, right, that we're not seeing spread in school. And then for everybody else, I think the thing to remember about masks is the masks are not intended to keep you safe. You're wearing a mask to keep other people safe, because the mask is, I don't know, 3 times more effective this way than it is this way. And the other thing you're wearing a mask for is to simply make others feel comfortable and respected. Like, I may know that I just got tested 5 minutes ago and that I had COVID 2 months ago, so I'm not currently positive, but I also know that other people need to be able to be in this space and feel safe, and so I wear the mask anyway. I'm not cavalier about it because it's a way of showing respect.
Well, I know the pool testing also has been leading to a lot of people feeling a lot more comfortable in this space. How do you see that changing throughout the year, transitioning into the new building? Are there going to be different spots where people can get tested?
So there'll have to be a new spot because the current lobby is not there. I actually haven't discussed it, but I would assume we probably would have one in the front lobby, the new front lobby, as well as keeping going down by the clinic. Pool pool testing is evolving right now. The state is moving towards, we're going to continue the pool testing, but the test at home option, which was just distributed to teachers today. So students, I don't know if you've looked at this, but students will be getting 2 tests every 2 weeks to take home with them if they sign up. Please encourage students to do so. And the reason for that is because if you test positive, you're out for 5 days from that test or from your symptoms, but then you can retest with your Binax test and come back on the 6th day. And so you can do that at home. Plus, if someone contacts you, a friend or somebody else, and says, hey, I've tested positive with COVID, you'll have tests at home so you can test yourself in order to really more quickly identify any concerns. And obviously, if you're symptomatic, you can test yourself at home and not have so much interruption of your schooling. So hopefully, the state is providing them, it's a good option. It is shifting kind of the responsibility because honestly, we are shifting, what does the public health folks say? We're shifting from pandemic to endemic. Flu is an endemic. It's everywhere. It's a problem if you get it and you're, of one of the people who gets sick. But for the vast majority of people, it's not a high risk. It's just a disruption. The challenge we have right now is even though for the most vaccinated young people, it's not a personal risk, but it's the same as the mask. Our emergency rooms are still full. So you don't want to make somebody sick or be the one person who does get sick and not be able to get services.
Right. Where can students sign up for the new at-home testing program?
So I'm not sure if the email has gone home yet, but it will be coming from Dr. Homan. I'll probably send it out as well. There'll be a link in there where you can sign up.
That's very good to hear. I wasn't aware of that new policy.
Always good to be first with the news.
Always. Do you mind if I read you a student quote?
No.
This student is concerned about the lack of communication regarding the positive test statistics at AHS. The school says 30 people test positive, but half of the students are out of all of my classes for multiple days. Do you have any thoughts about this statement?
Sure. So for the most part this year, because it's such a fast-changing thing, we have not been communicating about test results in emails directly to students. However, there's a dashboard in the district where all positive cases are reported and trends are reported. So if you go to the district website, you can look and you can parse and see what it is by school, what it is in the community, in order to get that information. We know when I said that there were 30 test cases, that's all we were reporting on was that that's what the pool testing. In fact, when we came back on that Monday after break, whatever we had around a little over 30 cases, there were more cases that had already phoned in and weren't there that day. So all we were reporting on was how many cases we caught, not on the overall population. But that information is on the dashboard.
Got it. So if a student tests positive and then reports it to the school, that information doesn't go onto the site?
No, it does.
Oh, it does. Okay.
All positive cases that are reported to healthcare professionals anywhere get reported onto that site. So if someone reports to their doctor that they're positive, it goes to the Board of Health. The Board of Health lets us know that that's in our pool, and we get that as well. So all of that information is tracked by the Board of Health, and we report into that system, and that's available on the site.
So it's a very complete database.
Well, it's hard to say if it's a complete database. I mean, there are certainly, I think in the school, the vast majority of positive cases, because if a kid's going to be out for 5 days, they need to tell us why. So I think we're catching the vast majority of cases in the school. In the community, I think there's a lot of underreporting because, if you think you've got it, if you Binax, you call your, if you're not symptomatic, you took a home test, you don't go to work for 5 days, people don't necessarily call their doctors or report to the Board of Health.
Right. How has your job been affected by the pandemic?
It has been much less pleasant. I mean, last year was hard for everybody, right? I love teaching, teachers love teaching because we like working with students, because we like being in community. Crazy it is, we're people who love schools. We love school communities, which is about coming together. So just that positive piece was taken away from all of us. Then we have a lot of people who over the last year and a half have been both really at risk and also anxious or struggling with the isolation that's come with the program. And so managing that fear, managing that conflict has been really challenging. And right now, for whatever reason, there are, I get letters from people who are really less and less, but we get letters from people who don't think we're doing enough, and we get letters from people who think we're doing too much. And for both of them, their level of anxiety is heightened, so our ability to sort of stay in good relationship with them is more challenging. So it's just been a lot.
Mm-hmm. What is that like for you to get emails from both sides?
So I don't mind when people write me expressing concern or asking for support or asking for information. I think I may get more of those than I wish I would get, but that's just work. I got in this job, teachers get in this job because we care about people. And so we're not callous. So when people send us angry emails sort of pointed at us, it's really stressful. Last spring, I taught the science of well-being class twice. I took up meditation. I had to do a lot of work for my own sanity and, to take some real time to sort of figure out how to find my Zen and be comfortable in that environment, because it's a more anxious, and it's not just COVID, right? We all know this. Right now, for whatever reason in American society, there's a higher level of conflict. People are more brittle, they're a little bit less polite, and that comes into schools. And my job has always been to deal with people at their worst, so it just makes that a little harder.
If people have questions or concerns, are you the best person to email?
No, never write me. No, I'm kidding. I mean, it depends on what your question or concern is, right? If you have got a question about what's going on in your classroom, the best person to contact is always the teacher. And if you come to me, I'm going to bring you back to the teacher, right? If you're working with a teacher and you're feeling like it's not being responded to and it's a curricular issue, you may want to go to the department head. If it's a sort of a personal conflict issue, you need support, your dean or your counselor is a really good place to go. When you've worked through those people who know you better, who are closer to you, and you're not getting a response that's helpful, or none of those people seem to be able to, then by all means contact me. But most of the time, I'm 2 levels above, and although I may be the guy who can, in theory, fix the problem because I'm in charge, I'm also kind of a heavy-handed, right? If I show up in a teacher's room and say, what's going on with Aiden? It's not necessarily the most comfortable conversation. It's a lot better to have that conversation with the teacher, to bring the department head in, to talk to the dean before you get to me.
I think the student-to-teacher connection is super important, especially in these difficult times.
It is what makes a school a school.
It is. How has the student-to-teacher relationship changed since the pandemic started? I know that you don't teach right now, but can you speak on that at all?
Well, I think similar to what I was saying. Last year, it was, you all know this, right? For any connection, it was so much more work, right? It was so much more formal. All the informal stuff that happens, as your students are rolling into class and you're like, hey, how you doing? How was the basketball game? Whatever. None of that happened, or the, hey, come over here, this paper, let's look at this for 2 seconds and move on. It had to be scheduled. You had to get on the Zoom call. You had to set a breakout room, right? And then it's 2 flat faces. One of the things that I thought about, so when people are in a car, and so their inner ear says that they're moving, but their eyes don't, or maybe it's the other way around, their brain says these don't match up, and so they make you feel sick. That's where you get car sickness. I must have been poisoned. When people spend their time on Zoom calls all day long, their brain says they're with people because they're with people in meetings all day long, but their body says they're alone. And that makes you think you're lonely and isolated. And that relationship piece was really, I think, the biggest challenge. So this year, I think everybody's kind of healing because we spent a year of that. And even though we may know in our heads that we were not alone, our bodies still told us we were, right? And so it's, I think, a real challenge for people to rebuild those connections. Our freshmen and our sophomores, when we came in at the beginning of the years, neither of them, we had 2 freshman classes, neither of them had ever been in high school, right? When, I would go to the cafeteria the first month or 2 of school and be like, whose school is this? Because I didn't know the freshmen, I didn't know the sophomores, and the juniors were all a foot taller than they used to be, right? And so there was this sort of loss of a lot of the systems and norms that we had. And I think that's just something we're all really recovering from.
Yeah, I think it was a very isolating and difficult process for everyone, but we're all very glad to be back here. Well, Dr. Janger, thank you so much for answering all of our questions. We know you're very busy, so we can't thank you enough for taking the time to participate in the show and for supporting us.
You guys are wonderful. You do a terrific job, and I'm happy to be here. I'd love to come back again sometime.
Well, yes, we hope that you can join us for some of our future episodes.
Thank you.
And we thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to stay up to date with the ever-changing scene at Arlington High School, you can visit these links that you see on your screen. A huge thank you to our crew here in the studio today. We couldn't have done it without you. Again, Dr. Janger, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of UView. We'll see you next time.